Greetings, one and all. Welcome to Champions of Purposeful Change. I'm Bill Gelin, president of Finch Brands, and your host for a conversation today with Matt Thell of General Mills, who's a senior strategy manager, as he will relate to you. That cuts across various components of innovation and certainly involves insights. And we're grateful to Matt for his time. He's going to take you through his career as well as how he's wired, the way he's wired, what his organization works on, and what their focus is. So enjoy hearing from Matt Thell. We are so excited to have Matt Thell with us. Matt is a senior strategy manager for the global marketing organization at General Mills. Thanks for joining us, my friend.
Yeah, happy to be here. Happy to chat about things.
Excellent. And I know there's so much that you've accomplished and can't wait to hear. And why don't we start at the beginning, if we could, a little bit of sort of how you've traversed your academic and career journey. I know a chemical engineering undergraduate degree, and now in the role that you're in. Could you kind of take us through that career path, kind of what led you here and what lights you up about it?
Yeah. I guess I'd say never underestimate the power of a coach. And
Yes.
by coach, I mean my football coach when I was 10, because I was playing one day and he called me aside and he's like, Matty. Like, yeah, because every football coach I ever had called me Matty, whether prompted
Right.
or not. He's like, are you good at science? It's like, yeah. It's like, are you good at math? It's like, yeah. He's like, you should be a chemical engineer like me. It's like,
Oh, wow.
oh, okay, why not? And basically that's the path I went down, right? Like I went through high school, went to undergrad, did the work, and then ultimately I realized that kind of at the core of it, I didn't love like the tenets of chemical engineering. It wasn't filling my cup. So then I'm like, oh, kind of stuck here. I got this degree that I'm going to finish here soon and try to think about what it was. And I was like, oh, you know what I do love though? I love food. And so let's figure out a way to make this work together. So General Mills was the perfect fit, right? Like they had made lots of food that I loved. I was practically eating my body weight in Gushers every year. So that was
right.
good. They were going to let me be an engineer that didn't have to deal with things like Reynolds numbers and constant stirred tank reactor simulations. And so I started out, I was a developer for Chex Mix and Bugles and Gardettos, and it was great.
Nice.
I was doing front end innovation, which I found like I really loved the fuzzy front end. But then, like as I went on, I was like, there's some things that maybe I want to reconsider. Some things happened, and I was like, maybe there's something else. And I'm trying to think, there was this one time when I had to go to Milwaukee to the plant that makes Gardettos, and it was an overnight run. And so basically I planned to like fly in at night, run at like 2 a.m, and then fly out in the morning. Didn't get a hotel room or anything like that. The key part to this is that the thing that makes Gardettos so delicious is it's got this slurry that you spray on it. So basically it's a mixture of the oil. Like think about like if you made Chex Mix at home, you mix the butter, you mix the seasoning, and so it's great. And so I'm running the test and all's going well, and then like without warning, like a hose breaks, and it's just like in the movies, it's like flapping all over the place, right? And it covers me head to toe in Italian cheese blend, which is like the most aromatic of the seasonings.
Sure.
So I have no hotel room, I have nothing to do, so I like borrow a spare uniform from someone at the plant, and I don't have time to shower, and I'm bored in the plane, and I'm kind of like looking around. I got my normal clothes in a plastic bag, and I plop down. The person next to me just kind of looks over, and I was like, you know what? I was like, I'll buy you a drink and tell you a really good story if you just bear with me for like the next half hour. So it was things like that where I'm like, I like front end innovation, but maybe this is not the exact thing that I'm looking for.
Yeah, a seatmate on the plane may appreciate someone doing more of an office job. You sure your football coach wasn't just suggesting to you very gently that maybe you weren't cut out for the NFL? Maybe you should consider something else.
It's funny because my 10-year-old brain processed it as like, oh, he sees something in me, and maybe it was he did not see something in me.
He's digging you. So across what at this point I think is a 20+ year career at General Mills, how have you mentioned starting the front end piece and having some of those wonderful experiences with ingredients in your clothes, but to talk a little bit about the journey inside as you moved. You were in the international group at one point. You're now sort of on that innovation and strategy team. How has that journey been within what is really a great global company?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about General Mills is we have this broad portfolio, right? And so there's so many different things you can work on, and there's, I'm a big breadth person, not a depth person, and so
Yes.
I love the fact that one day I'm working on like cat wet food, and then the next day I'm working on fruit by the foot and things like that. But internally, basically, I went back, I got my MBA, and plotted my graceful exit out of kind of the technical side, and that's when I ended up getting into the group that I'm in now. It's called the I Squad. Did a stint on the early end there, did a stint on the back end. Things are, General Mills is nice and open to like potential new opportunities, in the sense of like, the international group that I was part of, I pitched that as like, hey, I'm seeing this thing where we do all these really great strategic insights and things like that for the US. What if we were going to have that be focused specifically outside? And so my middle kind of route in there, in between the two I Squad stints, was like, I think we could start up a group, and like here's my Jerry Maguire manifesto equivalent, not quite as dramatic, but it was like, hey, like this is the thing, and it ended up landing.
Excellent. Very cool. And so now in your role, long range planning, ways to expand the business, kind of on strategy, corporate priorities. So what's the remit of your group, and what does it include? You're not attached to specific brands, I would gather, though you certainly, I'm sure, support them. But could you talk about kind of the purpose of the team that you're on currently, and where that begins and ends?
Yeah, we kind of say that we orbit the giant hairball, in that we're the gravitational force is enough that it kind of keeps us close and keep going around, but we're not necessarily part of the machine. We're part of a group that's called Disruptive Growth. It's a new thing that's part of strategy, but basically, we're a cross-functional internal strategic consultancy. So like we're like a General Mills specific think tank that basically helps our brands and helps the enterprise grow. On the brand side, like we get called in maybe when people have basically chewed on a problem for a bit and maybe haven't quite figured it out. So like maybe something's in decline, or maybe they see an opportunity for cereal growth in Brazil, or maybe there's like a gnarly question like, why don't teens want to buy better for you products? Like
right.
Things like that is something that we come in from a brand standpoint. And then on like the enterprise side, which is this disruptive growth thing, we have our venture capital arm, and we have small scale acquisition, and we have our co-founders, which are like internal, like little startups, groups of like 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. We are, we're there to help them with like front end discovery. So we just bought a pet supplements company. We did a little bit on like how to win in the pet supplement space. That was on like small scale acquisition. Co-founders, they need to be directed in a specific way, right? Like something at least to start on. And so we help them kind of pick a space, whether it's digging into picky kids or dinner fatigue, or like whatever those big human problems of food are. And I think we work well. We generally have a good high company tenure. We know about the machine. We're not of the machine. We're kind of consistent, and we're an external, but like a vested party, which works really nicely.
Yeah, I'd imagine the combination of skills required to do that. You talk about the multidisciplinary team. Obviously, there's a financial analysis and planning piece. There's a consumer and an insights piece. There's a sort of R&D, food engineering piece. There's a trend spotting and watching. It really does take. Is that kind of how the team's broken down, or are you all kind of liberal artsy in that way and love biting those things off?
Yeah, we try and make sure that we have a good mix, and it varies from time to time. We always have people with marketing backgrounds. We for sure have consumer insights background. At one point in time, we had a food anthropologist, which was really nice, but he was also, a PhD food scientist. We had technical folks. We like to find interesting people with interesting backgrounds that are kind of like, maybe misfits within their function at the time, and they're looking for a change of pace, like if they're going to like rotate through, or if they're more of a misfit like myself, they just kind of stick around for a bit.
Excellent. Become part of the furniture.
Exactly.
Terrific. You mentioned the venture capital and sort of the M&A piece, which I think is interesting and probably distinctive to General Mills, at least to some degree. Could you speak about, I don't know whether it's just kind of examples or stories, or what does it take to be good at that compared to the more kind of in the pocket, I guess, food science, analyzing where the brands can go? because that's I'd imagine a fascinating set of questions and topics that you get involved with.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say is we are not the deal makers, right? That's not who our group is. And actually we're intentionally kind of distanced from that in the sense of, if we knew too much, right? Like we would not be able to work with the rest of our portfolio like we do. Like we would basically be, if we did any type of due diligence or things like that, we would basically be whatever, tainted. We'd be part of the dirty team and not the clean team.
Right.
So like what we do is we try and make sure, like if there's areas that they're looking into, that we can give them a broader sense of what's going on, and they can take that and use it for specifics. So, I mean, I'll give you an example. Like we were looking before at kind of like global snacking and stuff like that. This was back in the day, and we decided to do some research on snacking in India. So, we as our group, we are, I'd say, more on kind of like, in this sense, more on the qual side, right? So we're going and we're talking to a lot of people. We're talking to tweens and things like that. And so like talked to a bunch of people in their home, talking to these 3 girls this one time. Mom's watching from the door,
Yep.
Asking about like, what's their favorite snack? And she's like, oh, like this potato snack from like the vendor down the street. Like that is like the best thing. We're like, okay, like what if all you could have was that snack from that vendor? She's like, oh my God, I would love that. Like that would be heaven. Like I can't imagine anything better. I'm like, okay. So, I'm taking notes and I'm scribbling them down.
Right.
I'm like, okay. What if the only snacks you could have are the snacks that your mom makes? And she's like, oh, she's like, that would be hell. And like she said it with like such like vehemence, like I'm shook. Like I stopped taking notes, and the mom now is like giving me the stink eye.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm not even doing the interview, right? Like this is all like happening like Tamal, and it's being translated to me. But like while this is happening, the girl who's like 9 years old is just kind of, she sees me not writing, and she like gets all up my face and gets my attention of like super intense eye contact, and she's like, note it down. Like, and I was like, oh, okay. So like I go and take that down. And so like that work itself was to basically do a survey of like what was happening in the snacking world in India, such that it could, be imported into the broader kind of analysis.
Right. And you uncovered some deep cleavages within that family that hopefully did not persist.
Yeah. And it's,
yeah, good.
Oh, I was gonna say it's funny too, and you think about like I never have the illusion that like I'm an invisible observer, but this clearly is like, oh, just my presence is being an impact on what's being studied.
Right, that's excellent. Yeah, we all have those stories from the road. When it comes to what snacking or things more broadly, I think you touched on it a minute ago. Obviously, there's a constant swirl of trends and changes and dynamics. It's new technologies to the way that channels have evolved with our digital life, to things like dietary preferences and sort of nutritional disposition, to looming, weight loss medications. I mean, we were obviously that made big news when Walmart mentioned it in their 10K. How do you and how does your team stay abreast of trends and shifting dynamics and just the sort of natural evolution of and never ending evolution of how things change in people's minds?
Yeah. I mean, part of it, there's the benefit of being, a member of a big company, right? Like we have all the resources at our disposal. So I know who the people I can go to for various things. Personally, I mean, it's clearly not an AI thing and not sophisticated in the slightest, but like I'm a pop culture junkie. Like,
yeah, right.
Doesn't matter the topic. If it's part of like the zeitgeist, like I want to know about it. The guy who started our group, so this was like 20 some years back. I remember when I first came in, we had subscriptions to everything, right? This is when physical periodicals in the group, like People Magazine, Us, that thing, and he was reading a National Enquirer, and I'm like, what are you doing reading the National Enquirer? Like that's like alien abductions and all this stuff. And he's like, it's currently the publication with the largest circulation in the US. He's like, it's like this is what people care about. And so like I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, and if we want to know people, we need to know what they care about. And so that's kind of like, I'd say, my direction of like, if whatever's going on, like I want to know what people care about. So I read different news sources, all the aggregators, serious, trashy, like it doesn't matter. And
yeah, well,
read
commerce
the
commerce is downstream from all of this.
Yeah, I mean, like it basically, like, I'm not saying that I can draw a direct link from, you know, what's going on with Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce to like my current project on like holistic margin management, but like
Right.
they're all the little dots, right? Like we use the analogy of like pointillism, right? So like you think about kind of like Seurat and his paintings, he's got all these like little dots. Like I want to gather all those dots and like make some sort of complete picture. And yeah, you gotta filter out some of the crappy dots, like those go away. We call those true but useless. But like I figure if all this stuff is kind of swimming around in my head at any given time, sometimes it's going to coalesce into something useful.
Definitely. And I'm going to resist the temptation to launch into the entire first act of Sunday in the Park with George here. I don't think our listeners will appreciate that, as wonderful as it is.
Sondheim is having his time. Like he is coming back.
Well, he is. I just saw Merrily We Roll Along for the first time on stage, which I know is a show that is thought to be imperfect. But wow, was it great. The cast, if you're in New York, go by all means go see it. But yeah, he is having a moment. He's had a 30-year moment, but it's wonderful to see so much of it. You talk about trends. I remember being struck by a project we did for a fashion brand, and somebody who was sort of a veteran was showing us how all of the kind of mainstream fashion trends at the time had been sort of outsider trends 10 years before. You know, it's like the skate and surf and sort of the punk lifestyles had been kind of recycled and brought into the, you know, the Abercrombie approach. And at the time it was Abercrombie and everything. It was just, it's fascinating how sort of societal movements and trends kind of filter through. And yes, so I'd imagine that curiosity and being widely read and being sort of broadly interested is a tremendous asset to folks who do what you do.
Yeah. I mean, everything's got an origin story, right? You just have to kind of like dig far enough down. And if you can, like you talk about the fashion thing, I think about kind of like the big line in Devil Wears Prada, where basically Meryl Streep starts with kind of like the thing that Anne Hathaway's wearing, and then she brings it all the way back, like something that happened before. And like, you know, it's nice to at least have that soil to dig from as you're trying to figure things out.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. You mentioned the role of insights, and obviously that's comfortable terrain for us, and it's kind of a rallying cry for this entire podcast is the insights world and the impact that insights can have in organizations large and small. And, you know, given the criticality of that, and that you may be working to address, you know, jobs to be done or consumer needs that might be acknowledged or may not yet be acknowledged, what is the role of insights, and how do you in particular use insights to support the work of the team?
Yeah. What's nice is I feel like my group is like gray, and as far as like we're not black and white people, we're very much gray, and so like we're less concerned about like I'd say the academic purity of things, right? Like I'm more concerned of if it gets me something. Like if a tool is useful, I use it. If it stops being useful, I stop using it. So like my big thing is like, you know, insights without action are just fun facts, right? Like they're just right unless I can do something and translate it. So yeah, we used opportunity maps for a long time, and they helped us, and we got good results, and that was nice. And you know, then we turned to jobs theory. Jobs theory seemed to work even better, you know, so we adapted. But really, like what I'm looking for is I'm looking for like what can I get that helps my team focus in a way that they can get good ideas or strategy. Like the story that we tell people is, and this came from our chief technical officer, where it's like, okay, you know, growing up, my grandpa had a farm, go to the farm, and he always had this pail that had just like a bunch of different like arrowheads that he found in the field. And he's like, I want to find an arrowhead. So he goes out and he just searches around, he spends, you know, whatever. However, it's a long time for a small child, you know, an hour. He comes back. And he's like, I didn't find anything. And grandpa's like, okay. He's like, well, tell me what you did. He's like, well, I looked here and I looked here and I looked here and I looked here. And he's like, okay, like, here's what I'm going to do. So he comes up and he takes him outside, and he basically takes a stick and he draws a circle around himself. He's like, I want you to look in this circle. The kid kind of looks in this circle, and then he goes and he does it again. He makes another circle and he looks in another circle and does that like repeatedly. And, you know, he finds one, which is great. Amazing. And so kind of like we use that of like, okay, we are going to give you those circles that allow you to focus. Now, whether that comes from a specific type of map, like great, you know, if it's a job, cool. If it's an insight, cool. But like that type of focus is the thing that we're looking for, like with teams and how we work with them. And so, I mean, So I like stories. So I'm going to give you a story, if
Yeah.
that's all right.
Sure.
So was doing work in like the Middle East and North Africa, and it was all around like baking. So we spent all this time doing things like ins and outs of like home baking, right? People use their signature cake as their avatar on social media, like, oh, that's so cool. And like maybe like if they give a recipe to someone, they leave out something so that they can't recreate it. And like, oh, it's like a great insight. So we built this jobs map, and felt it's cool. It like captured all the different things that were like universal, but also specific. So we got this map. And then we're in Dubai and sharing it with the team, and we're talking about how we're going to use it. And one of the things we wanted to do was like a head-to-head review with like competition, right? Bake our Betty Crocker cake and have the competition. Like let's use this map to identify opportunities. So we tell the hotel chef, and we're like, hey, make this Betty Crocker cake, make these other cakes, just do it as the instructions. Comes time to review, and we go out in the hallway. There's like nothing you've ever seen, right? It's like multi-layers and buttercream and ganache cascading over the top, and like all these little delicate chocolate curls. Like it's like a work of art. I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, thank you so much, but it's not what we're looking for. And he's
Right.
and don't worry. Like, we know you can do amazing things. And basically, his response was like, I don't care. What would they think? And I'm like, who? I was like, what would who think? He's like, the people that come in the hallway and see this, that is a reflection on me and what I can do.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, how about this? Like, what if you just like put it in the room and then no one has to look at it? He's like, well, what would my assistants think, or the servers? Like that's okay to leave my kitchen? And like the thing is, this whole interaction basically became the catalyst of what we ultimately did, right? It summed it up perfectly. This idea of pride in your work and exceeding expectations, and the desire for opulence. So it led to our innovation. It was a kind of the key underpinning of our news, like all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I had this great jobs map, but in the end, it was like this one interaction that was like the tool that was needed in the moment.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, and I think we're always, our industry in general is trying to find ways to not only use, and you talk about jobs, I think one of the limitations, I guess, of that framework is how do you come up with the next thing? Everyone, when we run into executives who don't appreciate insights, they always quote Steve Jobs. If I'd have the iPod and everything else wouldn't have happened in consumer groups. But I mean, to your point, there is a need probably to really get into people's skin and understand how they think and what are the real drivers of not just unacknowledged needs or needs that aren't yet met well by one of their options, but what could come next based on how they're wired, what they believe in.
Yeah.
Constant pursuit. It is. So, I mean, what a amazing career you've had and the work that you do, not only just the countries and the situations and the brands and products that you've touched. For those who may be listening who are sort of inspired by that path and might be thinking about their own, either starting out or starting over or whatever, any sort of words of wisdom or things that have sustained you along the way? You mentioned from early in football practice, driving you in a certain direction, and just being kind of the learner you are and the viber you are as it relates to the culture. What are some thoughts about, maybe that others might be able to adapt for their own career and professional lives?
I mean, first of all, I'm expecting that I've inspired tens of thousands based off of this.
Yes,
it's a conservative estimate, but I am humble, so I will go with that.
Right.
I mean, the thing that's always kind of worked for me, and I had a manager earlier in my career, and it was one of those things where we didn't necessarily vibe, right? Like we're not going to go out and have beers, but he was a great manager. Like I really recognized, like, oh no, like the stuff you're telling me is amazing. Like we can't joke. That's fine. We'll do pleasantries when we start. That's good. That's socially appropriate. But like I realized one of the things that he said is like, be an expert at something small but useful, and then use it to like help someone else, and then basically just continue to like build upon that expertise. So like for me, like I want to make the change. I wanted to do international work, but there wasn't like a lot of international stuff happening at General Mills that I could be a part of. But I saw that like granola bars were growing and that we'd need more granola bar capacity. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a process expert at granola bars, and I'm going to use that to help developers. And then something came along where it's like, okay, like we needed to improve some product in Poland. And I'm like, hey, I might not know Poland, but I know process. So, and I'm not part of your joint venture, but I bet I could do that. So that worked out. And then, we had some line going in Argentina. And I was like, well, I've done this in the past in another non-US country. I bet I can do it over here, even though I'm not part of your international group. And so then even when I like make the career change over to strategy, like Haagen-Dazs came out and like I think, oh, like I worked in Europe and South America on kind of like stuff like that. So basically each time it was taking that little bit of expertise and trying to like learn something new in each one, right? Like maybe I'm learning about how to do consumer recruit in India, or maybe I'm trying to figure out, you know, how cultural differences apply in like channels. And then key to that is helping someone who like basically has some sort of like, you know, important thing, a stake, and maybe like some way to help you in the future. So building that kind of like expertise roadmap and thinking about where you want to go and just doing it in like chunkable steps.
Yeah. So and you've collected experiences along the way, and I'm sure some of the projects you were given or tasks that you were working on may not in and of themselves have been thrilling, but it seems like you extracted a heck of a lot of learning value that puts you in good stead for what was to come.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Matt, we really appreciate your insight and your wisdom. And you know, I talk to students from different places. One of the things I always tell people who are interested in insights or brand as a career is kind of like when you walk through the grocery store and you look to your right and left, you know, try to sort of think back when you see something new on the shelf. What was it that led to that? You know, what did somebody sort of come to believe that made them defend? And you know, maybe isn't reliable because some of these are not great ideas, but and they always, you know, is there anything that a student, let's say, could read or do, or a behavior that they could sort of ingrain that helps them get curious in the right kind of way?
I mean, to that end, so kind of to like pick up on your thread there, like something that's super easy to do is like if a company is good, if a product is good at like knowing what they stand for, like they're probably talking about it, right? And how they talk about it is going to be in different ways, right? Like how they talk about it on the package is going to show up in one way. How they talk about it on the website is going to be different. How they talk about it in their advertising, but all of it should like distill down to some core nugget that they had that they thought was useful. And so just spending some time, like if there's something that you're interested in, like a specific product or brand or whatever, like just look at what they're saying, look at their website, look at their social feeds, look at their product and be like, okay, like what is it that they're trying to say? Because hopefully, again, if they're smart people and they're doing it right, it should be coming at you in a super, super clear way.
Yeah, sure. And it should be based on some belief about how that product delights people or solves a problem or whatever. And I guess those that don't make it are those that don't. But yeah, no, that's a great thing for people to think through, and those who may not be exposed to this world every day, or maybe think that these ideas sort of poof out of air and they show up on the shelf and either they succeed or fail. But there's a lot that lies beneath. And Matt from General Mills on the strategy team, thank you for sharing all that lies beneath in your world and all that you guys do day in, day out.
Yeah, thanks. It's fun chatting.
Thanks to Matt for his time, his insight, his passion. Really appreciated the conversation and gained from it. So thank you, Matt. 3 ways, as always, to support us here at Champions of Purposeful Change. The first is in the podcast app or platform of your choice. Click subscribe. That'll make sure you do not miss a single episode. Also in there, the second way is to give us a rating and a review. That'll help us learn. That'll also help us get found. And then thirdly, let's keep the dialogue going on Twitter at Bill Gullen or at Finch Brands. Or any of the other ways of contact. We love to hear feedback. We love suggestions for future topics and future guests. And if you pursue each of those 3 ways, or 1 or 2, or hopefully all 3, you will help us make sure that this content is of value to you all. Now that we're back doing this monthly with insights and innovation leaders, we're excited about Champions of Purposeful Change. We're excited about this industry, the impact that it has, the ways in which it pioneers methods of data collection and consumer understanding. And so thank you for joining us, and we will sign off from the Cradle of Liberty.